Hello, and welcome to the April 2022 edition of the Editor's Pick. This is the program that aims to keep manufacturing and engineering professionals up to date with the latest news and what's going on out there in the world. My name is Phil Jepson. I'm the founder and director of Allied Global Engineering, which is a small but vibrant and growing engineering group based in the Midlands and the Northwest. And I'm delighted to be here today and joined by four incredible guests who are all peers of mine, all business leaders from the Midlands engineering and manufacturing community. So firstly, I want to introduce Steve Hardiman. Steve's the Managing Director of Clevedon Fasteners, and Steve's going to talk about his article around post-pandemic trends in manufacturing. So welcome, Steve. Then we've got Fabio Cosenza, who's the Sales Director from CBE Plus. Fabio is going to be talking about the growth and relocation of his company's EMP division. So that should be cool, Fabio. Looking forward to hearing about that and talking to you about that.
Thanks, Philip.
And thirdly, we've got Billy Hutchinson, who's a director of Leicester's. Leicester's have been in the news recently, talking about their mission to get the government involved in helping us with energy and material costs. And Billy's going to talk about that. So welcome, Billy.
Thank you.
And finally, last but not least, armed with his 22 years of experience, we've got Chris Knott, who is a partner at Cooper Parry, specializing in research and development, tax reclaims and incentives. And Chris is going to be talking to us about the Chancellor's budget statement and what that means from the industry, looking at it from an R&D perspective. So welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Phil.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is to start with Steve and talk to you a little bit about your article, Emerging Trends in Post-Pandemic Manufacturing at Clevedon Fasteners, which was a really interesting read. And there's a few different aspects, a few different angles in that article that I just wanted to raise with you and see if you can talk a bit about it. One of the things that you talked about was the way that the pandemic and all the stuff around it had caused you to look at your management structure, and that you'd developed a new, flatter structure for management. So do you want to just start by talking a bit about that, why it came about and how it's different from what you had before?
Yep, sure. Welcome. Hello, everybody. Basically, we're a traditional manufacturing company, an SME. And when the pandemic hit, basically we had to shut for, I think it was 2 weeks, because everybody was told to start to work from home. As a result of that, the only people who could go back were actually our shop floor workers, and everybody else was working from home. The pandemic sort of crystallized a sort of Dunkirk spirit within the guys on the shop floor. And to cut a very, very long story short, effectively, I hope there's not many production managers and planners watching this, but we did away with our production manager and planning manager. And basically the guys off the shop floor now do all of the planning and decide what's going on the machines and so on and so forth. That took a bit of a something we had to do to do that was to actually trust our workforce. So we let them know everything about our customers. We let them know what the prices were, what the high value jobs were, so that they could plan properly. And what that enabled us to do was for us to be able to then make changes on the fly very quickly, because we got hit by, like everyone else, by supply chain difficulties. So wire became a problem, subcontractors, and the guys sort of sorted that out. And as a result of all of that, basically our productivity has gone up by 28%. We've gone from making 22 million pieces a month to 28 million pieces a month, and our absentee has gone down, and our employee engagement has gone up. So it's worked very, very well for us. It may not work for everyone else.
Fascinating. And actually, a lot of the biggest and most successful companies in the world interesting. Take a similar approach of getting responsibility and accountability down to the lowest possible level in the business. So that is, it's really interesting that you managed to achieve that. But not only did you do that, you also reorganized the working week.
Yeah, that's right. Basically,
so tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. We checked. Sorry, start again. Basically, we worked 5 days a week, and what we found was Fridays was basically a non-day. Everybody was looking forward to the weekend. If people were going to book a holiday, it was always going to be on a Friday, so they got a long weekend. We checked all our OEE stats. Friday was the most unproductive day of the week. And during this transition that we went through during the pandemic, the guys were also aware that we needed to get every penny we possibly could out of the company. And so consequently, what we did, we went to 4 days. So we work 4 10-hour shifts. We start at 6:30, we finish at 4:30. That helps the guys, now that we've got out of the pandemic, it helps the guys in terms of transport and so on, because it's a lot easier. But it also means that we're a lot more effective. And now overtime is a Friday, whereas it was a Saturday, and it was difficult for people to work overtime on a Saturday. So it's worked out very, very well for us. And I think if anybody can work the 4 days, you'll find it much more productive. And part of that productivity piece is a result also of reducing the number of days we work.
Fascinating, isn't it? That you can work less but produce more.
Yep.
In a way. So, and I mean, just generally beyond that, obviously you talked about the changing the structure, you talked about changing the working week, but what other opportunities were created for you by all the disruption to supply chains that happened in the course of the pandemic?
Well, but basically, because and all the guys on here will know this, the global supply chains have been absolutely shattered, and particularly, but specifically talking about fasteners, which is what we do. I have a deal with the workforce that basically, if we can't make it in Sutton Coldfield, then if we can make it by importing stuff, we will do. So prior to the pandemic, for a container to be delivered, it was about £800 per container. And that container, you know, if we were selling iPhones, that container might have £2 million worth of product on it. When you're selling fasteners, it's probably got £50,000 to £60,000 worth on it. At the height of the pandemic, and currently, we're being charged between £8,000 and £12,000 per container.
Wow!
So basically, our margin is just blown out the water. But it's not. So it's not just. But it's not just us. It's everybody. Everybody who's on the high street. Everybody. You know, one of the things that's driving the problems that we've got at the moment is the fact that actually getting stuff delivered is a nightmare. So that's led to a lot of people realizing that whilst they can get stuff for 50% cheaper by buying it from the Far East, it's no good if you can't get it. It's no good to you. You then have to spend money to actually support your customers. So a lot of people are looking at reshoring, thank the Lord. And so in the UK, all we've got to do now is get the government on board to actually support manufacturing. All we've got to do is get the government to understand what manufacturing is, and then they can start supporting it.
Yeah, interesting. And I think we've all seen the effects of reshoring, and we're all working and doing our best to make sure that we can take advantage of this once in a lifetime opportunity. So that's cool. That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Steve. So I want to move on now and talk to Fabio. because while Cleveland Fasteners were busy doing all the stuff that they've been doing, CB Plus have also been pretty active. So,
Indeed.
yes, and that involved quite a big relocation exercise.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having me, Philip, and thank you, Steve, for a very insightful piece there. Yes, the relocation of our electroless nickel plating plant is actually a lot more than just a logistics or a operations endeavor, so to speak. The surface treatment is really a large proportion of our business, and it's what we aim to be to become the best in the world at. Supported by the CNC machining. So more than a logistics or an operations endeavor is really the realization of our vision, which is to create a sort of multi-skilled, multidiscipline supply chain for our customers and deliver on our unique selling proposition, which is, of course, reducing lead times, reducing costs, and minimizing supply chain risks, all more important these days, as Steve mentioned.
Yeah. So were there specific reasons why you needed to relocate that division?
Like obviously there were some obvious sort of management accounting, benefits, I suppose, and motivations. But really, the main driver was to create this sort of integrated supply chain provider that we all envisioned when the various businesses were invested into and then brought under a single umbrella. So of course overheads are now a lot lower than what they were, but really the benefits go much beyond that in terms of the innovation that we bring into the business, where we have effectively started from a blank canvas and designed the surface treatment facility that we wanted to have, rather than the one that evolved over many years of being in business.
Yeah. Okay. And what were the big hurdles that you had to overcome in terms of actually making the relocation, making it happen?
Well, I think it's fair to say there were a lot of moving parts involved in this process, and the electroless nickel plating, process is not really that common in the UK. So we felt we were in a much better position to project manage it internally. So certainly the bandwidth that was absorbed from senior management on the relocation was significant, and like I say, there were many moving parts that had to be managed. However, we are now seeing parts coming out of the new coating facility. So we feel really kind of vindicated into the effort and the pain that we have to endure.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, anyone who's even moved house will understand the kind of things you would have had to go through. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, well done on that. So
Thank you.
You talked about now stuff coming off the line. What are the biggest benefits you've got from now having everything together in one place?
Well, there are many benefits that we're seeing. One, of course, is the fact that sort of our teams are now working from the same location. So, despite having been sort of part of the same group for a number of years now it really feels like we're all working for a unified entity. And this is even more important for those customers where we do provide the complete kind of selection of services such as CNC machining and surface treatment, for example. Efficiencies, speak for themselves. We have made investment into making the existing plant even more efficient. So now the entire group is benefiting from those, of course. But mainly, like I say, it's like I mentioned before. This was our chance to really design a unique surface treatment facility that we could draft effectively as we wanted it. So it's really the realization of the vision that brought the businesses together in the first place.
Fantastic. What a great story. Thank you, Fabio.
Thank you.
So now, Billy, let's move on and talk to you, because while Steve's been reorganizing and Fabio's been moving, you've been looking to do some moving of your own in terms of moving opinion rather than moving physical stuff. So tell us a bit about what you've been doing at Leicester's, and this whole issue of government support that you're so interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, for us, we are very, very similar to Steve. We've grew around 120% through pandemic, so it's not. I'm not painting the black picture, but for us as a business, our growth's been phenomenal. But what we're now facing up and down our supply chain is a big concern, because we see our industry as a critical supply industry. For us, everything that moves around in everybody's day-to-day life generally gets packaged in some form. And for us, in the last 12 months, we've had 70% increase in raw materials, and it's still not stopping now. And it's not a case of the increases. Yes, they're not very nice. It's a case of, can you get supply? Because there's shortages of paper, European spread wide, and obviously this is being magnified with the Ukraine and Russia conflict. 6% of the European market is supplied out of Russia, Ukraine. That slack's got to be took up by other European suppliers. Coupled with that, with energy increases, we're one of the lightest energy users within the supply chain. So for us, our energy on new renewal tariff is an increase of 160%. So that for us has got to be passed on somewhere. You go up our supply chain to a corrugator, so a sheet feeder who supply our corrugated sheets. It's going to put between 1.4 and 1.6 million on their utility bill costs in increases. You become unprofitable very, very quickly. Go a little bit further up the supply chain, and we've already seen 9 European closures of paper mills who supply the paper to the sheet feeders. There's 9 of those already shut because they've become instantly unviable, because they're even more energy intensive to us, so electric and gas. And it just seems as it's just brushed off. If this was steel, if this was aerospace, it would be headline news. Fuel for the last how long, in terms of household fuel bills, in terms of petrol and diesel costs, it's plastered all over the news. Our industry just seems to get forgotten, but we play a critical part in most supply chains. And as Steve said, the UK is enjoying a lot of reshoring, but these increases they're gonna push it back away again, because people can't make things competitively enough to be able to reshore them and fully appreciate container costs, so on and so forth. But on top of that, a lot of paper comes from all around the world: America, Canada, Russia, Ukraine, Brazil. A lot of it's containered. Well, Steve just said the cost of a container pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, and it's a case of, can you actually get the goods, because of the backlogs in shipping lanes and container bases. It's constantly creating spiraling costs. You couple that with, we've just seen increase in living wage. We tend to give all our team members the difference on any increase in living wage. None of them are on minimum living wage. They all get the difference. That's between 70 and 90k uplift for Leicester's as a company. That's just a one-off cost. We run a fleet of 6 trucks at our packaging site, so our fuel bills have rose by about, I think, 3 or 4 grand a week in petrol. Energy costs, raw material increases. The consumer just ends up paying more for products, and it's where do we draw the line? Where are the actual increases coming from? So these energy increases, right? Okay, so what is the need for the uplift in these energy costs? Does it need to be offset so we can continue to thrive as a country to continue on this manufacturing sort of crusade that we're on and make it great again in terms of manufacturing, we've got to do something about it. And our industry, everybody just sucks it up and just, yeah, okay, well, we'll have another increase, and it's never heard of. And my customers are absolutely sick to the back teeth. Every other month we go back, there was another increase, and people have become numb to it. And nobody likes bad news. I don't want to be the person that's, whenever you're being contacted, it's to tell you of an increase. You're all obviously in a commodity-based industries. You will all be suffering from these. It's not just corrugated. It's not just cardboard. It's wood. It's steel. It's every component, plastic, and it's. But for me, it's all contributing to inflation, which I really don't think is being reported in true figures, if I'm honest with you, because I think we'd be scared if we've seen the actual inflation rates. It's crazy.
So what can they do is the question, because the thing with government support is it's like anything, everything has to be paid for one way or another.
Absolutely. So, but for me, it's this where we need to look at job. So is it job creation or is it creating job loss? So we need to look at it from that angle. The productivity rate out the UK, are we going to get to a stage where we just say, yeah, okay, well, we've reached our ceiling height, we're not going to grow anymore as a country because businesses become very unviable very fast? There's got to be some sort of offset somewhere.
Yeah, okay. And one of the things that you're looking at as a business is vertical integration.
Yeah.
So just tell us a bit about that, about your thoughts on that and how that might help you in the midst of all this stuff.
Vertical integration is in our plans to sort of buy supply chains up. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Yes.
But for us, we want to create a Leicester's eco bubble. So for us, we want to own the people that supply our power, our ink, our stereo manufacturers. We've already got our distribution arm and warehousing arm. That's providing really, really sort of another service that we can tag on, and it's all data driven for us because the cross sell is already within the business. Then, so
yeah,
the pool of data that you can cross sell with makes life a lot easier and helps with growth and opens doors to other sort of businesses that you wouldn't normally get into. So we're already position trial. We're looking to acquire at least another 4 packaging companies and then start to look at those 4 companies buying the supply chains into those companies.
Yeah, fascinating. And again, it's a model that people went away from it a few years ago and were into subbing everything out. But actually now I think a lot of people are coming around to that way of thinking, which is building an ecosystem and then getting out of it all the different value that you talked about. So yeah, that's fascinating. And at least we've ended that on a bit of good news. So thanks for that, Billy. It's not all doom and gloom. I mean, it's not easy for any of us, but it's not all doom and gloom.
No, that's not the intent of the message.
No,
it's just to raise the awareness, because it's not just us suffering. It's our sheep feeders, the suppliers that are suffering. It's our customers that are suffering, and ultimately the consumer, because the consumer will just end up paying more for consumable products.
Yes, yeah, and as you said, I think we're seeing that already, and it's going to be like that for a while, I think.
Yeah. The issue that you've got as well is the cutthroat industries that are operating within the country. Give, I don't know, say an egg farmer, they have to contract pack their eggs. The supermarkets dictate what price they sell the eggs to. We go back to them and say, oh, bulk boxes have gone up by 30% in the last 6 months. It makes his operation unviable because it's that cutthroat.
Yeah. I think it's one of the great fallacies of business that big customers are good customers. I think it's the opposite, actually. I think big customers are the worst thing you can have.
Absolutely. Too big a concentration of any one single customer is a dangerous game to play.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's move on and talk to our final guest. We want to leave on a high note. So we want to talk to the man who can get us free money, money for nothing. So, Chris, firstly, congratulations. I gather Cooper Parry has been shortlisted for Tolley's Taxation Awards for the best specialist team. So congratulations on that. And we want to talk to you about your specialism, which is research and development tax relief, which is something which is now becoming more and more widely known about within manufacturing and engineering. You said before we came on air that a lot of people will say to you either, well, we don't do any research and development, or oh, thanks very much, we're already covered on that. But obviously, it turns out quite often that neither of those things are true. So that's,
yeah, if I had a pound for every time I'd heard both of those, I'd be retired by now. So
yeah. So just to begin with, just tell us why research and development relief is relevant to SMEs who obviously don't have specialist research and development departments. So what are they doing that is research and development, and what does it all mean in the SME environment?
Okay, thanks, Phil, and good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, just to touch on the Tolley's thing, we're very, very pleased with that award. We're one of only 4 that have been put forward, and Tolley's been the definitive voice of tax, UK tax, for over 100 years now, and produce a lot of the research materials used in the tax industry. So their own strapline, I believe, is celebrating excellence in the tax industry. So we'll go with that. So happy enough with that. So we'll see how we get on in a month's time. In terms of R&D, so yeah, the issue comes from the sort of traditional view of R&D as a phrase. Yeah, what does R&D mean? And in the kind of normal world, if you like, yeah, R&D conjures up images of rocket science and farms and chems, drug development, that kind of thing. And yeah, absolutely, of course it is. How many of those have I dealt with in 22 years of dealing with R&D incentive claims? You could probably count on the fingers of one hand, because it's very much the R end, the blue sky end. People know that they're doing what everybody would call R&D, and hence don't need any help. Now, what we've got for R&D incentives is a tax definition, which is very much and intentionally drawn much more widely than that. And so, strictly speaking, it talks about needing there's an overall advance in a field of science or technology, and hand in hand with that, there needs to be an element of the resolution of technological uncertainty. Draw a line through all that. Say, lawyer speak.
I'm sure we put
good.
Your hands up if you understand
just said that a few times over the years, right? I boil it down to 2 words. It's change and challenge. So essentially, you're in an industry that could be classified as scientific or technological. So anything manufacturing, would be classified within that. Automotive, aerospace, all the usual stuff. Anybody making anything essentially is in the science or technology. So what does that mean? So change is you are looking at anything, and it could be new, it could be an existing product, and it could be process. And these are all elements of this are what people miss. And so going back to that change, it's you're changing something in some way, any way at all. That means your product range, be it new or existing, your manufacturing process has had a difference, and it's made it better. So that's the first element of all of those words that are in the books. Second one is challenge. So essentially, by making those changes or trying to make those changes, because you don't even have to succeed, you've had to face some challenges, some head scratches, some time spent, and the longer someone spends when you've been doing this for years, everything there is to know. Well, why is it taking you 6 months to put that change through then? Well, because actually it was quite difficult. It needed some thought. Another good indicator of the level of challenge is testing. So you've had to go through a rigorous testing process. Well, why? What's a test process trying to do? Well, you're checking that you're heading in the right direction in terms of implementing some of those changes. Well, if you know, why are you bothering wasting the time and the money and the effort in going through that test program? So that in itself indicates some kind of uncertainty on your behalf as to whether you're going to get this thing to work or not. So those are kind of strong positive correlating factors. So it's this, what people need to realize is this idea that it's a tax definition and it's very much wider. And so In terms of from a manufacturer's perspective, and an SME at large, it covers both, I guess. The sorts of things that can qualify. If you look at the product side, there's obviously new product, there's existing product, but with new functionality. Then everything from new materials, new applications, value engineering. In fact, we make fasteners out of steel. Well, you've done that for years, haven't you, Steve? Yeah. But you know what? We're going to try and use a cheaper grade of steel because the price of everything's going up. So we're now going to have to use a cheaper grade of steel to make those same fasteners. Well, do you know what? The end product, it's a fastener made of steel. To the end user, it's exactly the same thing they've seen for years. But internally, you've used a cheaper grade of steel that's 20% cheaper. That's actually meant you're actually making a margin. It's cheaper for a reason. Strength properties aren't as good. The tensile properties aren't as good. The heat resistance isn't as good, and the whole thing warps if you're not careful. And so there's a value engineering exercise that needs to be gone through for 3 to 6 months to make sure that that end performance is maintained. Value engineering, well-trodden path, qualifies. Lightweighting, space constraints, you could go on. All of those things are well-trodden paths for things that qualify, and it's everyday engineering in the manufacturing world. The other side, manufacturing process, increase yield, throughput, decrease wastage, increase recyclability, all of those changes to the manufacturing process that makes it more efficient, again, due to some of the external factors that we're seeing. All of that kind of stuff qualifies.
Okay. Something else we talked about was, again, before we came on air, was the fact that there are a lot of people out there, open quotes, advising closed quotes companies on making these claims now, and that in the nicest possible way, they don't all know much about what they're talking about. Now, obviously, R&D covers quite a wide range of things, but people are making claims and getting money back from HMRC in perhaps in circumstances where they shouldn't be getting it because they've not been well advised. So if it's all so wide, the different things you're entitled to claim for, what are the common areas where people are making claims where they shouldn't be getting money? Where are they getting it wrong?
Well, there's 2 ways to both increase a claim and make sure you're getting it right, but also the ways to get claims wrong. And so there's 2 ways. Effectively, you need to be claiming for the right areas of activity. And so people sometimes include activities that aren't allowed to be included. And so if you're using the kind of the same old kind of templates to make something that you've made for years, there's not enough of a difference to what there was before, what you made before. That kind of thing doesn't qualify. It has to be in a field of science or technology. And so if it's a business process improvement, we're raising invoices in a certain way, then that isn't going to qualify either. So there are areas of activity that don't qualify that sometimes can be included. Similarly, costs, and there's a very set number of cost areas that are allowed to be included. Staff cost being the main one, consumables, there's a bit of utilities, there's a bit of software licenses, things like that. But there's costs that are very specifically not allowed, like sort of legal fees for patent applications, things like that, which you would think, well, that's all part of my R&D, isn't it? Especially if I'm doing something clever enough and different enough to the prior art that I'm applying for a patent. No, they're not allowed to be included. Similarly, for large companies, there's areas such as if you're getting in agency staff to help you out, SMEs are allowed to claim for that, large companies aren't. So there are some differences within the 2 regimes. And so it's quite easy to get probably more easy to get the costs wrong than it is the activities from including things that you shouldn't. So
Okay, and I mean the government and HMRC in particular doesn't necessarily like giving money away, and they have this sort of tendency to start closing loopholes and bringing in the boundaries of what can be claimed. So, as we stand right now, what do you think is the direction of travel of the Chancellor in terms of this regime, the R&D tax incentive regime, as we move forwards?
Well, the spring statement was interesting because it's the first time that the Chancellor's kind of issued a little bit of a warning shot across the bows as to what's coming up. We've had years and years of the budgets have been great if you're an R&D advisor. It's increases in rate, increases in what can be included, removing a de minimis, removing an IP ownership requirement. That happened a few years ago now. And so we're always keen to sort of see the budgets and what good news has the Chancellor got for us this time. It was a slight change of tone over the last budget and then the spring statement, because it got to a point where this is costing the Exchequer about 6 billion a year. So it's getting quite expensive now. And so And like you say, this closing loopholes elsewhere. Well, yeah, they have, but the issue is they've left this scheme open, and it's never been a loophole, it's never been a problem. They've always very much backed it, but it has meant that there's nothing else for the kind of less scrupulous advisors that you referred to kind of focus on, because this is the most generous thing left in the book. And so it is difficult for companies to get it right and to get the right advice. And unfortunately, from HMRC and Chancellor's Exchequer perspective, we're now seeing the cost of that. And so last time out in the budget, there was mentions of sort of clamping down on and tackling abuse, and tackling the sort of rise in claims, and also wanting to see a sort of bit more bang for our buck in the UK in terms of, is the SME scheme really providing value for money? When you compare it to the large company scheme, it's about a quarter in terms of, for every pound spent on the relief, how much is that generating in additional R&D activity? It's sort of reported to be somewhere between 60 pence and about £1.20 for SMEs, and about £2.40 and £2.70 for large companies. And so this has now hit Rishi's radar in terms of, okay, well, there's maybe something that we need to do about the value for money within the SME scheme, and also the abuse that's going on. What do we need to do? And so at the last budget, he already said there was some good stuff. There's like, we're going to increase cloud computing costs, data storage, hosting, increase that in the spring statement to include pure mathematics, which helps AI and robotics and things like that. But there was a clampdown saying about, okay, we're not quite sure about overseas costs. There's a lot of costs that we're giving away R&D incentive money for that actually isn't even being spent on UK jobs and UK costs. It's all going overseas. Not sure we like that. We're thinking of stripping it out completely. So any overseas costs we'll take out. So that was the last budget. Spring statement softened that slightly in terms of, because there has been a bit of a consultation process, which of course we and everybody else inputted into. Say that, okay, if there's a material requirement due to geography or skill set to use that overseas, or legislation, regulatory reason as to why you need to do your testing overseas, for instance, then we'll kind of let you off. But then, so there's a little door there. So there's a he introduced a big clamp down and then introduced a loophole. Great. So we'll have a look at that when it comes out. Some of these changes coming in April 23, by the way. And so the other sort of thing that happened recently is he gave a speech which was picked up by the Financial Times. Did say about this value for money of the SME scheme, and he wasn't quite sure that it was working properly. Even said that it started to become a drain on the Exchequer, which is not a great phrase to hear out of Chancellor's mouth about a relief scheme, is it? And so it did get another mention, exactly those words in the spring statement, and he said that he may have to go further than what he's already announced in terms of those ideas for tackling abuse, but he hasn't come up with them yet. And so he said it's a bit of a there's a bit of a warning shot, but a watch this space in terms of okay, SMEs, not sure what's coming our way. Doesn't sound great, does it? But we don't know what it is yet, so let's not panic. Is it going to be a reduction in rate? Don't know. Is it going to be a kind of a tightening up of maybe having to match what they're giving you or something like that? We don't know. All of that's pure speculation. And he says he's going to let us know more in the autumn budget.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. But the message for now is, if you are a business in manufacturing or engineering, then this is something which you should definitely be looking at.
Absolutely.
And you need a good advisor to help you to do that. Seems to be the message as well.
It does.
So, yeah, no, that's great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Phil.
So that brings us to the end of our discussion. I'd like to say big thank you to the Maiden Group for having us on the editor's pick today, and also thank you to Steve, Fabio, Billy, and Chris for joining me and providing some really, really interesting discussion points, and hopefully you guys out there will find this useful and interesting. Make sure to check out next month's editor's pick, where it won't be me, unfortunately, although I've enjoyed it hugely. They won't be back for a while, but it'll be someone else, and they'll be taking you through their top picks of the month and speaking to a completely fresh group of guests. So for now, thank you very much again, and goodbye.
Thank you.